issues that we're all seeing. Love to make this interactive. Anybody can jump in here, small group. So the changes we've seen in the last 18 months are dramatic, no matter what industry you're in or what demographic you are. It's really everywhere, and it has made permanent shifts that are going to stay with us and really change everything moving forward. So this idea of the new normal is kind of odd to me, because there is no normal anymore after the pandemic. We really are in a different world. Everything is different. And the small to medium business role across the United States is enormous. 99.9% of all businesses are small businesses in the US. So we're talking 30 million companies that make up 64% of new jobs that got created, and I believe that data point is from 2019. We also see the dramatic impact when we see 100,000 US companies having to close in September 2020. This is the shifts we're going to see and continue to see as companies struggle to stay in business with rising inflation, continued supply chain problems, and really dramatic shifts with consumer perceptions of everything is going to have an enormous impact moving forward. We're going to see companies working to adjust to a distributed workforce, finding new ways to reach and serve their customers in the B2B world, and then again in the B2C world with reaching consumers. And a complete rethinking of businesses and how you operate with your locations, with your staff, with your technology, and with the money that you spend. It's quite dramatic. The things that are taking place, even just checking into a conference, I just had my temperature taken, and they're giving me, these things to show that happened, which I think are great. That's what they've been told they need to do, so I'm happy to do it. If I need to wear a mask, we'll do that too. It's going to increase costs. It's going to increase liabilities. Everything we now decide about our business staff, I'm making decisions on, should we send our team to CES? We host a one-day event at one of the largest trade shows in the world. What if people get sick there? What if they can't fly home? And then I have to pay for their hotel. What if we're out of network with healthcare in Las Vegas? Because our business healthcare insurance is specific to our in-network, which is in the Texas region. There's a lot of things that are attached to the meaning here moving forward with COVID. The remote work, the ability to bring in new staff, to train them, to have them understand how you do business remotely. This is challenging times to bring and onboard staff. It's also challenging to retain them. In the last 2 years, I've had people depart with no notice. That's never happened before. I've been working at Parks now for 24 years. I've never had people leave with no notice, not even a day's notice, right? They found something better, and it was really easy to say, they're done, and I'm like, wow, really? And then, so the expectations of, how people are is different now. I have to change my expectations, so I'm not surprised when that happens, right? Because now that's a real possibility. It's happened several times, which is weird to me. Not strange, though, to people who are doing it. They have a new opportunity, and they're taking it. That's how it is. Companies are looking at spending more on IT and technology to enable retention, to enable change in their operations, and to move forward and try to future-proof their businesses. It's really almost not an option if you're not looking at how you support your remote workers, how you support your customers remotely, and the types of communication services that they have, and what the tools are. It's now has to be. It didn't have to be like that 2 years ago. We didn't need those tools necessarily. The permanent changes that are coming with employees working from home, I saw on LinkedIn this morning. I love LinkedIn. So if you're on LinkedIn, I'd love to connect with you. I'm really big on LinkedIn for learning and education. But there was an article about hybrid and is it here to stay? And it's like, well, yeah. I mean, we're all doing this almost, we're really going on long months here, years where things are changed. So, yeah, employees are going to expect flexibility and they're going to want to work at home, and why do we even have to ask that question? This creates a lot of impact and need for new ways for management to operate their business, their teams, their culture. I mean, it's all tied up together in how individual companies are able to move forward and stay in business, which that's the name of the game here for small companies in the next 24 months. It's still change is coming. Whatever other variants might come, who knows, whatever other shutdowns might happen, might be there, whatever other regulations are put in place and mandates, we're all along for that ride. So thank you for listening and hearing some of our data and insights. Again, we are actively surveying consumers all the time. We talk to the business side all the time, and I'm really excited to hear more from Deanne and Scott in some of the ways they have managed through with their own teams as well as their client side with their business operations. So let's just start off, Deanne, we'll start off with you and talking about the biggest impact you've seen here with your company in the past 18 months since this pandemic started.
Well, I think it's impacted us all very similarly. We right away needed to go to work from home. And what did that look like? So we had a corporate office that had people that reported to the office every day, and we needed to figure out how to keep that business functioning. But then we have a field staff that needs to report to the customer side. So in the first few weeks, it was chaos. Who would let us on site, who wouldn't let us on site. Literally, California shut down pretty early, and the Bay Area in particular shut down early. And we were quick to determine that we were essential and put everybody with a note saying out of the order that was there, hey, this is where we fit, this is why we think we're essential. Right off the bat, though, it drove us to think differently. So we had already allowed people to work from home at different times, whether they be somebody that works in the field, being able to work remotely, depending on the customer and the customer's needs, but also from our employee standpoint, could we function? And we had that in place, but not for everybody on a consistent basis. So what was that going to look like? So we went and started putting a work from home stipend in place, so that everybody could be set up, that they didn't have to stress and fret about how am I going to do this. They had the tools that they needed to perform their duties, realizing that there was not here just kind of put a Band-Aid on it and make it work until you get back in the office, because we had no idea when we were going to get back into the office. So that turned into this stipend that we would give to ensure that they had the proper ergonomics for a chair, for a desk that they needed, wanted. They already had something. It's like, here, it's your bonus. Just take it. I didn't want receipts. I didn't want to deal with it. That was the way we handled that piece. The actual work, everything has a docking station, laptop, 2 monitors, and a camera. Funny thing is, we order everything on our Southwest card. My husband is the IT guy. Alexa every once in a while wants to remind me it's time to order new cameras. That's how many we were ordering. She still reminds me, it's like it's time to order new cameras. So it was a challenge. It's something where as we've come back into the office, we've asked people to come back 3 days into the office. We don't pick the days for them. They work with their manager to do it. We take it on the honor system. But some people, it's not healthcare, but childcare and so forth. It's been a challenge because we kind of started and stopped and so forth. So it's an ever-changing target, and it's looking different. but finding ways to be intentional in how we gather has been big.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the same impacts. I'm curious, like if all of you out there that work in offices, just quick show of hands, how many of you are working in an office where 100% of everybody who was working remotely has now come back? 1 or 2, 3. Okay, I was curious because that's what's kind of interesting to see is I think everybody shut down to some point, right? When March 2020 COVID hit, everybody kind of sent people away. That's what we did. I had our kind of back office staff, customer support people, billing and all that, started working from home. We were fortunate, well, I say lucky or maybe some pre-planning or some of both, but we had always set up our company where we could work from anywhere, just in terms of access to servers and all of that. And then this was pure luck, but like 2 months before COVID hit, I heard about this offering with our bank where our person who does our billing and deposits and all that wouldn't have to drive over to the bank every day and deposit. We could actually just, I know you're looking like everybody knows that, Scott, but the check scanner, yeah, which is kind of fun, scanning checks. But anyway,
Definitely.
I know, we got all that. It's the best part of the day. We got all that set up right before COVID hit, and so it worked out great because when COVID hit, my wife who worked started working from home, and I had 3 teenage boys who were going to school every day, and they, the school sent everybody home. And so I used to go to the office every day just to maintain my sanity. I used to say I was socially distancing from my family. But yeah, with a wife and 3 teenagers at home, I was going to go crazy. So I've been going to the office in many cases, by myself or one other person for quite some time. But it worked out well because we kind of put the systems in place to do that. And then what's been interesting is, so I still have a couple of employees working from home. One comes into the office at times, to do some of the stuff she's got to do with inventory management, what have you. But what happened to me with one of this, I guess, plays to flexibility is one of my billing people, her husband got transferred. We're in Atlanta, right? So he got transferred to Connecticut for a better job with his company. And she came to me and said, I'm working remotely now, and I really, really want to stay with the company. How would you feel about me working from Connecticut? And so I had to give that some thought, and ultimately, I couldn't find a good reason why not. She does a great job, and the job that she does, all our billing, is online and automated and can be done from cloud-based and all that. So in our case, we now have a person remote to us who's in Connecticut, and so and it's actually worked out pretty well. Because there's still a nice lady in a postal Jeep who shows up every day with a pile of checks. Again, that's the highlight of the day. We just throw them in the old check scanner, and she handles the deposit from Connecticut and all of that. So I think to the point that you two were making, I think there are some things that probably will have changed forever, in terms of how we work. And it's interesting to see both internally, but I'm sure we'll talk about this too, externally with our customer bases.
So the people that are working from home, are you seeing less in productivity out of any of them?
Not for us.
Well, it's interesting.
Probably.
It's interesting. So there's one of them.
It's hard to know.
One, for example, I don't see really any change. Always available. One, and in her defense, her schools were shut down longer. She had 2 young children, running around the house, and she's trying to get them onto their Zoom calls with the school. And every 5 minutes, her youngest, I think he's 5 or 6 or something, he's running in there, Mommy, I can't get the camera. So it's going to be hard to be really productive all the time when that's happening, right? Her kids are now back in school, and so I've already seen kind of an uptick. But it's still hard for me to tell what level of versus if they're sitting in an office next to me, I can see what level of productivity we're getting. It's hard to measure, and I feel like depending on the person, I'm getting better performance for some than others.
Do you have a fear of the loss of the camaraderie, the
Yes.
water cooler talk, the teamwork?
Yes.
That's what we saw even in 3 weeks. I was making everybody do a Zoom call twice a day just to keep everybody engaged.
Well, the interesting thing is, I think with the loss of productivity, it's evolved. So when there was school shut down and when there was all those issues, it would be, people were getting up early to start their work, and we're in California, so everything is like, check in, check out, do the whole thing because the way that the payroll goes. So that was a little bit difficult, and really, quite frankly, the laws are going to need to catch up with it, with this hybrid way of going, because it's here to stay. But the interesting thing is the Zoom piece of it, it does, for me, we have the five different offices, and we would struggle with silos with the different offices and people having kind of a different culture in each office. What I think that it did in a positive was it allowed us to all get together to meet regularly. And back in the very beginning, we were meeting a couple times a week, getting all the managers together. It was really intense, and really nerve-wracking. Then we went to once a week, and then just recently we've gone now to once a month for our whole big manager meeting. But I think what it did do is allowed us as a company to unify more than we ever have, something I've been trying to get to. So we had people that didn't embrace getting on camera or getting on screen, or didn't quite frankly have the equipment to do it. Now all of a sudden we're looking in a meeting, and I might have 4 people located in San Jose and 1 person in each of the other offices. And in the past, or I'd have everybody in San Jose and 1 person on a call. That 1 person on the call didn't feel like they were really part of the situation. Now all of a sudden we're all, just go to your office, we're all on a call, or some people are at home. And now we're having the back and forth. I can see you, we're communicating. You do run into the other aspect of it. You can sit there and have a meeting, and some people could be on their phones or be distracted, not quite able to multitask the way that they can now on Zoom. On Zoom, they're answering email, they're doing whatever it is that they need to get done. They're doing something over here. So there's going to need to be a intentional way to move forward with that, to start addressing it as we start doing more things via Zoom. Because when you get distracted, then you lose the benefit of having everybody together. So but from the productivity side of it, some people we saw more productivity because they were just on it. And that was where, no, you need to take a break.
We had a comment in the way back, so I want to make sure you had a chance, Mr. Blue Shirt.
Kind of answer my question. The question though, would you ever see yourself ever going back to the way it was?
No.
I don't either.
No, I don't think it would be. I don't think it would be embraced to go back. I think that the hybrid is truly a thing of the future, or it's here, and I don't think it will ever go back to where it might.
But I think the biggest concern that any of the owner operators would have is how to gauge the productivity that you're getting.
And I think that's the core issue is are you able to have people be as or more, would be better, productive in a home environment working setting as they are in the office, and not lose all the camaraderie and this water cooler talk and culture stuff. It's a good question. It's hard to measure that.
I'm scared to send people back home to work. I'm scared to death of it because we are building such a great culture. We've got people that are more engaged now than they've ever been engaged before because of the Zoom calls when we did. And now they feel like they're a part of making our company better because they're all included in everything we do. They know we put all of our numbers up. They know how much profit we make. They know how much money we lose. So they know everything. Empower them that way. So I'm scared. I'm scared to death.
Well, I don't know how you got them all back in the office. I'll have to talk to you after this.
One of the things that you're doing, so to keep people engaged, when you're talking hybrid, that means they are in the office sometimes. And so being intentional when we're in the office, that camaraderie, how do you build that? When it was all back on Zoom, we would have, we watched Hocus Pocus last year and did a Zoom movie night. We did, I make chocolate chip cookies. It's like the only thing I can make that's halfway decent. And we sent ingredients to anybody who wanted to participate. We did those kinds of things to kind of have some fun.
Right.
And a lot of people joined. And we got to see their kids, we got to see their experiences at home. In today's world and how it's evolved is how do you intentionally have the time that you're in the office where you can be the most productive? So you don't need to have, if I'm having 15 Zoom calls, they don't need to be when I'm in the office, or I can do those from home. I need to be there when I'm going to be purposely meeting with people and intentional in that. We also built in our San Jose office an outdoor patio to where we could bring everybody in, have a barbecue, do some things to have that camaraderie that is a little bit harder to do because we don't want to bring everybody indoors. So in each of the offices, it's it's a unique challenge. We also run into the commute issue. So, and I think a lot of people probably run into that as well. People got used to not having to commute an hour and a half into the office every day. And they are more productive because now they are doing stuff. So if they know that they only have to come in 2 days a week or 3 days a week, and 2 days they're not, I'd like to get away from the work-life balance piece, but it does provide a time to catch their breath. And the last part of that one is from trying to bring people together and let them know where we're at. I do a video every month or so, or when there's a need to have communication. And I think that's been a beneficial, positive way. You just kind of make it very much, it's me doing it, so I'm not super videographer person. But it does seem to work to engage people. I'll get text messages from our people in the field at different times.
Yeah, did you say you bought all the hardware for all your remote workers?
Yeah.
Monitors, cameras, laptops?
Yeah, and that's one thing we did ask in our small to medium business study was, were companies giving stipends for their staff? And that actually prompted me to give $45 a month to all of our staff to support their broadband, which is important. I want to go over here for this question.
Yeah, we're talking about not knowing if someone was as productive in a remote environment versus in the office. And I would argue that if you don't know the answer in a remote environment, you didn't know the answer in the office either. Because I think what remote work taught us is that if you don't rely on hard metrics, seeing that someone's busy or doing the George Costanza, looking frustrated in their office is not a measure of productivity. So I think the cultural engagement piece, I think the mental health perspective of remote work is potentially more challenging, less so on productivity time. And that's not just the game, it's travel. I think people generally fall into two categories when it comes to work. They're separators or they're integrators. So the challenge for remote work is those who fall into the separator category. They like home and they like work. They don't like to blur the line between those two. And remote work blurs that line without a choice. Your kid is in the background, your dog is barking. So that is a challenge from a mental health perspective of burnout that we see with certain individuals. The challenge for us, in addition to that, with remote work, came in the form of salary negotiation. So when you break down the physical and geographic barriers of, what I make in New York versus Chicago, LA, and then in rural Kentucky, if you eliminate the geographic component, you're now competing nationally on the salary band scale. And that is a serious challenge in some instances, depending on the type of work that you're doing. So the benefits that come, from LA are always going to outcompete, rural Kentucky.
Well, you also have to be set up. You have to be set up in those other states in order to do payroll and so forth. So it does start to play to say that I can do remote work. I have to be set up in those other states. And if I'm not set up, then I can't be open to it. So I can be very, very generous with my employees of what I can and can't do. But you know what? We need a decision that's very generous within Washington, Nevada, and California. I'm not going to be going to Utah. I'm not going to be going to these other places, because now all of a sudden it does open up to where I don't have those metrics in place. I don't have those payroll ranges in place. Does it work to where you're doing the same function as the rest of the people? So now you live within this box, but now your cost of living is a lot less. It even is difficult with Washington and Nevada don't have income tax the way that California does. So that does present a problem as well. So yeah, it's a big deal.
Well, and a lot of this, I think, does revolve around trust, and you're trusting that your staff, your employees are doing what they need to be doing, and they're working for the business, and aligned, everybody's going down the same road to the same goals. And sometimes for people in the circumstances with COVID, things are hard. All of a sudden somebody's kids got the virus. Now the other two kids might have the virus. Now the parents are getting tested to see if they have the virus. I mean, that's literally happening in Dallas frequently. around here, we've got a lot of the kids who are getting the virus, and then, you know, it's spreading and everybody's very concerned, and then you're watching your staff. Is somebody going to get sick? I mean, there's a lot for people to be on top of when they're also very, you know, seriously concerned about their own health. When that starts becoming an issue, they're distracted, you know, and of course they are, and with good reason, until hopefully everybody gets past the being sick or whatever is going on as it relates to COVID. So it's a lot, you know, but technology and that ability to be remote and also to serve your customers however you can serve them is really important. And that brings up the topic of managed services and the idea that now that you're extending your business to a consumer's home and running your business there, how are you going to be protecting your servers and your data and the hackers? I mean, gosh, I'm always talking to our IT company, make sure we don't get you know, hacked and then ransomed or whatever, because I don't have, you know, $1 million cash to unlock our data, and that is our entire business. We're a research firm. If your communications are locked up in the cloud and all your data and everything you're doing, you're at risk, and you get holes in consumers' networks, and that's also going to become a cost in the future to make sure you're protecting your own business interests. And of course, that the consumer understands that, you know, a VPN access opens up the threat with security. I mean, that's a big deal to consider as well. Was there a comment? Yes, sir.
How will they be working together, maintaining the high level of security to be protected from cyber and dealing with the access from employees from the outside? Again, software, PBX, data, and everything. How exactly that works?
So I think the question is, how does it work to add on the software, this protective type of on?
So you're talking specifically for the central stations monitoring, alarm monitoring, or just in general?
In general.
In general.
And monitoring is particular, but yes, in general.
Yeah, I know there's a couple of central station people here. From what I know, because we outsource it, but they had to have a big IT focus on that. Had to set up the workstations at everyone's home if they're going to be taking monitoring phone calls. They were using VPNs so essentially they were able to use their network phone switches and VPN technology, you know, headsets, and connect it to the computer to be able to process those phone calls. But I think, I mean, the point you're making is a good one, which is, you know, it may not be, or probably is not going to be good enough just to say, hey, just plug into whatever internet you have and you're good to go, right? Especially if you're working with customer data. And to your point about hacking, you know, it's like you've got to be very careful. You've got to demonstrate if you're working with customer data, data protected by privacy rules. You guys have privacy rules in California? And so, you know, you have to demonstrate that you've got processes in place, and you've got that you're safeguarding that data, and that, you know, and so that's always a challenge, even if you're working everybody in the office. But it's a bigger challenge, right, if you're outside the office, and if you're, you know, people give examples of, if let's say you if you're in California, some celebrities as customers, right? And you have someone working from home and they've got the screen up, and that data, maybe the person's address is on screen, and someone happens to see this. You know, there's scenarios, you can kind of go down a rat hole on some of these scenarios, but it's just an example where you really have to give some thought to how you're protecting that data, securing that data. If you're going to give your employees the flexibility to work from anywhere, how you do that and safeguard that information.
Well, and I think that goes to the whole policy piece of it too. So you really, we had a policy program in place, or policy in place for working from home, but it was light because it wasn't something that we did a ton of, and we didn't want to be like all hardcore about it all. but we needed to revamp it. We needed to make it a little bit more stringent. One of the things that actually preparing and talking to one of our individuals who deals a lot with our cyber piece, that he had a really good idea that we will be implementing was essentially doing, and I don't know exactly how to word this, but an NDA with your employee. That, you know, especially to that point that they're going to be, they could possibly have data on their screen. Where are you set up in your work from home situation? You know, we gave people a stipend so that they're not sitting at their kitchen table, that they could be at a different place in their home to try to make it as private as possible. But at the same time, you know, how do you put things in place? You can have rules and regulations up to a point, but how do you put some meat in that? And his comment was an NDA, and I thought, I'm going to explore that a little bit more, because I thought that was a good, to help our people understand the seriousness of that potential cyber threat and the privacy that they are entrusted, that when they're outside, their office at home is an extension of us. So
Yeah.
that was a good idea.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and ultimately, though, the business operations also has that responsibility to their staff and that consumer at home that they're now having work remotely because it's convenient and great. There's a responsibility for the business, and that does require typically reoccurring costs every month that is monitoring your own network and is pushing out updates constantly because of the new threats that are happening, you know, and coming through. So, you know, we've got data here that shows that 47% of at-risk SMBs, so those that are concerned about going out of business, are also very concerned about reliability of the internet for their workers. They also, 35% would like the ability to help prioritize business traffic over personal traffic. And if you have any children who play games or watch Netflix or whatever, Disney Plus or Zoom, because you had them at home, and then you're trying to do your own business, you can run into a bandwidth problem pretty quickly. And so there are these new services with routers and managed services where you can redirect the traffic and basically split that bandwidth up. And that's going to be one of the next things that the software on the business networks are able to help at home, is to give that a priority. But then you have to manage whoever else is in the household as well. This is all related also back to broadband service providers, the increase that we're seeing across the board in internet-only services. So pay TV subscriptions are dropping, broadband-only services, plus the value-added services like cybersecurity, like parental controls, like malware type of detection. These are now the add-on services that Comcast and Cox and all the Tier 2 and Tier 3 providers will be offering. Instead of the pay TV bundle, it's a new bundle that is including these other services. And within the security world, where you're already providing services, there is that opportunity to look at that as a possibility for reoccurring revenue in the future for your own services that you may be delivering. So,
Yeah, I think it's a great point, because I think that's, we talk a lot about the internal, for our employees who work remotely, but I know with our customer base that we end up having more conversations about either troubleshooting or issues related to broadband. Just one example was working on last week. We have a customer who's got his main offices in Atlanta. He's got kind of a satellite office in a rural area in North Carolina, and it used to be that he was in Atlanta every day. And then COVID changed things, and now he works sometimes in his Atlanta office, sometimes in his North Carolina office. Well, Atlanta, he's got Comcast, very robust broadband, no issues, right? Well, up in North Carolina, he's got DSL, which sometimes is okay and sometimes it's not, and the okay is not even that okay. And so it's driven more conversations about, well, I'm trying to watch my cameras in Atlanta because I'm not there this week. I'm up in North Carolina, and these are slow, and these are all like 4 megapixel high definition, really good cameras, and he wants to stream them full frame rate and all this. So my point is that as we see this kind of mobility of people working, even in our customer base, I know we're seeing it, I'd love to hear if others are seeing it, but I'm getting more questions about how do I improve my broadband experience, or how do I get And, you know, in some cases there are options, in some cases there aren't. Like where he is, it's the rural telco that has DSL, and you can either, your choices are you can have DSL or you cannot. And so those are your choices. And so it's driven more conversations. And I wonder over time, always on, everything's connected, remote access, remote connectivity, all of those things. What will drive that? And so you mentioned the broadband providers and Cox and Comcast. My wife happens to work for Cox Communications in Atlanta. And when everybody went home in March of 2020, they had a flip out moment because all of a sudden the usage on their network, which they had carefully managed and predicted across the broadband networks all around the country where they have cable and broadband, the whole thing got turned upside down. Because it used to be they had this amount of usage during the day and this amount of usage during night. They had peak hours and they knew that, well then all of a sudden everybody's always on all the time, working from home. And they literally could get to a point where they could correlate. They could see, you know, in a cable network you have nodes, right? So you have fiber out to a neighborhood and then from there it's coax cable going to the homes. And each one of those is a fiber node, and they could look at the performance on those fiber nodes and they could tell when a fiber node got to a certain point, they could correlate that with more call volume into their call centers about, you know, concerns about speed. So they had to kind of go into full battle mode and just start prioritizing how to upgrade their network as quickly as possible. So yeah, I don't know if you're seeing with your customers, but I know we're definitely seeing more conversations about broadband and broadband experience as they're accessing their camera systems or whatever else that they're, we're providing to them.
Yeah, and our data really supports that on the consumer and the business side. That, I mean, broadband it's almost becoming like a commodity. I mean, it's like the fourth utility, even though there's still 22 million households without any kind of internet access. So there's still a large population that I know industry is working on getting that type of access out to the rural areas. But it's a huge focus. There's a lot of consumers now are going to be ready and willing to upgrade their services. Our data shows that broadband households, 56% report that they value technology more than they did before the pandemic. So, more than half of everybody is saying that that is a critical part of their daily lives, whether it's their personal life or their business life. So lots of investments coming in that area, and the future of artificial intelligence and machine learning and the technologies that will enable predictive and proactive types of events so that you know that things are going to happen before they happen. You know, that is what the Googles and the Amazons and these sensor-based companies are working on. A lot of the chip manufacturers adding in different components within their chips that allow for artificial intelligence, and this plays a huge role in the overall security offering and what the capabilities and applications are that are going to come for both commercial and residential. Anything from biometrics and accessing buildings with access and control, down to potentially serving consumers with healthcare at home and understanding that somebody is about to fall 10 minutes before they actually fall simply because of the monitoring going on within their sensors stuck on their body. I mean, that's where this is all going, and it's a huge role that technology can play. And I'd love to hear, Scott, from you about how you think technology is going to impact the industry moving forward, as you're relating to your customers, really.
Sure. No, I mean, I think it has been, the last few years. I look at the technical people that we hire now versus the ones maybe we hired 10 years ago, and it's a different, I'm sure I'm not alone in this, but all of our techs carry laptops, they all have tablets, we do all electronic work orders and dispatching, and, years ago we were doing it on paper, right, with no laptops, and every system that we work on now has a network component to it. There's really no system that doesn't, and so now we have to have technicians, and I know I'm kind of preaching to the choir for all of you who have technicians, but you have to be computer savvy. You can't make it, and to your point, Elizabeth, it's just going to continue down that path, I believe. You hear a lot of buzzwords, IoT and all this, but the reality is there is a lot of that stuff happening. And you were talking about predicting if you can fall. I think I read somewhere that Apple just announced that their next generation health tracker will do that. Like if you're walking a certain way, it's going to give you a warning that you may fall. You're out of balance, kind of a thing. So I think it's just going to continue to be like that. I think that It's going to be always on, always connected. You know, I was thinking the other day, what if this COVID thing had shown up 20 or 25 years ago? Do you think that we would have all worked from home even as long as we did? Could you imagine with no broadband and no Zoom trying to work? I mean, everybody would have been on conference calls on landlines. I mean, I just don't think that would have, I don't think it would have worked the same way. I think everybody would have, you know, we'll be home for a couple of days. All right, let's get back to the office because nobody can do a conference call on the landline.
Let's go back. Sorry, just to the gentleman right behind you, and then we'll go.
All right, yeah, just a comment, which is an observation, and then a question. So my comment is, earlier you were talking about work from home and performance, right? You see it as a gap. One thing I've been noticing, and we have a pretty large staff, is those that are not on camera and the most performers.
Lois, yeah.
Yeah, let's say the bottom 10 or 20%, right? So just something to be cognizant and aware of, and they were even prior to going remote, right? So earlier in your opening comments, you touched briefly on supply chain disruptions, the impact of businesses, and in any of your studies or surveys, and if you listen to the Fed, they talk about all the time inflation's transitory, right? It's a temporary thing. For pretty much anyone on the dais, are you passing these increases to your COGS on to the customers, or just absorbing it today, believing and buying into that inflation's transitory, or are you passing it on? Absorbing the increase to your COGS, or passing it?
We're pretty much passing it on. So I mean, it might be absorbing a little bit, but as our supplier prices go up, we're also bumping our prices up to try to maintain our margins. I don't know.
We're doing the same thing. Brad could actually speak to it really well. You want to tell him what we're doing?
No, I was just going to comment.
Okay, I'll answer it then. One of the things that we are doing is you're getting those quotes that are less amount of time, right? We go for 30 days. You're having to pass that on also to your customer. And it's like, and some are even changing it. They're giving you 30, but then they're really saying, okay, 20, your pricing is changing. And so how are you putting that out to in your proposal to your customer to make sure that they're aware that this is only good for a certain amount of time because our prices are going to go up. So it is, because it is going to pass along.
So you're just balancing that against real-time costs.
Yeah.
That's all you can do.
Yeah, it is. It's really all you can do. One of the things with all of this is we're still evolving. We're still, I hate the word, pivoting and agility, all those things that we've talked about for the last 2 years. But you know what? It's true. We're still having to be very agile and pivot as things are changing. They're not being so drastic, but so now it's more of an evolution of it.
Yeah, and we have our dealers study out, just getting back from the field, so I don't have that new research, but we will be reporting back on additional costs that dealers are sharing with us. And even, we're surveying security dealers who are commercial and residential. They serve both, but actually asking, what are additional costs that they see as a result of adding interactive services, smart home devices, because now you have to pay for support. And you have to have the remote capabilities, and you have to be able to help the consumer at home because of the interactive services. So while you're getting that added little chunk of revenue to go up on monthly reoccurring fees, you're also now having this other manage the support side. So I'm interested to see how the security dealers dealt with the past year, and a lot of our fresh data will be reported next month.
And one just quick point on the cost. The reason that we're passing them on is that, in my experience, and push back if you've seen otherwise, is that when manufacturers whose products we're using raise their prices in a time of inflation, I rarely ever see them come back down. So I agree with you. It is transitory, right? The inflation is, but I don't say, hey, guess what? We've cut our. I mean, I'm sure it happens, but it doesn't seem to go down as much as. I understand why they're going up, raw materials and all of that, but I just don't see it come down very often.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I was just curious if that's being embraced and adopted, because again, it is a transient event, right? It's not long term. And again, if it goes up 5 points, it might come back to 3. It's not coming back to 0, right? So we understand that. It's just, it's a hard sell sometimes in a competitive environment, right?
It is, yeah.
Especially to Deanne's point, when you got a quote out there. So if your quotes were good for 90, maybe it's time to readjust down to 30, right?
I think
Or
that's
15
the,
days
or
even.
less, right?
Or
Yeah,
less.
or you have a clause, because I mean, the ones I worry about are, okay, the quote's accepted, the contract is signed, and then the project doesn't start for 6 months, right? And now you're having, because now you've agreed on a fixed price contract, right? Now you're stuck. So then it sort of raises begs the question, do you need to do something with your contracts where you have kind of some sort of clause in there where if your raw material prices increase by more than X amount, that you can then go back and reprice it? I mean, we priced a project for a general contractor 6 months ago that kind of went all these crazy places with the end user, but they just kind of looped back with us and said, well, guess what? They want to move forward after all. But at least to his credit, he said, can you guys reprice it? Because I'm sure your prices have gone up, because I know all the people in all our subs who are working with aluminum and lumber and all that are telling me that the raw materials are up, and I'm sure you guys are. So we're in the midst of repricing it for him on the fire alarm and access control and everything we're doing.
Well, yeah, and the costs there are big, and there's also labor shortages. There's so many factors right now that are impacting things. We talk to a lot of the tech guys on the hardware and the silicon side, and I mean, it's a huge problem, and I think we're only in the very, very beginning from what I'm understanding. I mean, I'm hearing 56 weeks. I'm like, 56 weeks? Wow. That's going from 8 weeks 8 weeks to 56, and they're still not sure if that's going to come in, and they've got these things that have like 150 components to make it, and so they're waiting for all the components. So I think I'll be interested to see how Christmas goes, watch the holiday season and how everybody handles. I went shopping the other day at Nordstrom's, and they said they had no jackets. Like, I was looking for a new jacket. They didn't have any, because they don't have any jackets in the store. I'm like, we're at Nordstrom's. Okay, yes, sir.
So I have a self-serving question. You guys, brought it up about pricing and cost of materials and so on. And both of you, Deanne, you used to operate your own central station. You said, you told everybody that you contracted it out 5-6 years ago. Scott, you contract out as well. Your central station prices that you're paying for services, they haven't gone up, they haven't changed. Do you find that alarming or of a concern? That how can you keep getting a service for 6 years or however many longer, and it hasn't changed? Are you giving up on services? Are you allowing your service provider to go more automated and electronic to find efficiencies? Are you missing the service levels that you used to have? I mean, how long do you expect your service levels and pricing to stay where they are?
Good question. You know what? I haven't thought about that, to be really honest with you.
You'll see a post of mine coming out hopefully on the Kirschenbaum blog. There was a comment from a dealer about how his central station got moved and everything is in turmoil. Well, he was using a provider that went bankrupt. Do you two feel that you should be asking your service provider at some time to say, hey, are you making money on me?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, it's a really good question. I have thought about it a bit.
Because you're invested in that.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. I mean, you're like this, right? I mean, so I have thought about it. Unfortunately, and you may not like this answer, but unfortunately, what ends up happening in these highly competitive situations where cost becomes a big issue is that you start seeing a lot of consolidation, right? So the big ones get bigger, the small ones go away, and then what they try to do is leverage their fixed cost infrastructure across a larger base of recurring revenue, right? So then that gets into, well, so if you're with a small central station, do you need to be worried because of potential bankruptcy versus somebody who's large and getting larger? And I think your point's a good one. At some point there probably has to be some sort of price increase as the cost of labor goes up. Yeah. But I think, a lot of central stations are probably afraid to do that. I don't think they should be as afraid as they might think, because there is a switching cost, which is a complete pain in the neck, right? There is that whole thing about trying to move an account base over and repopulate the data and all that. So I think that it is, from my perspective, reasonable to expect that, maybe not annual, but occasionally there might be some sort of a small price increase per account across our base. I don't know if that.
I mean, I
Agree,
can see
disagree?
that. I'm sitting here as we asked the question, I'm thinking about our central station, and a lot of what they've done is put in additional safety measures in their facility, but they didn't go from a work from home. And so really a lot of things didn't change. They kept everybody in the office, or in the central station.
I don't really see it as a COVID question.
Yeah, but I think in general,
longevity question.
You're right. I mean, we're 5 years into being with one of the reasons I got out of the central station business. So it could be.
Walmart and Amazon raise all their hourly prices. I mean, I think it's going to put upward pressure on hourly labor prices across other industries, such as call center workers, right? So that's the thing I see is COVID or not COVID, whatever's driving that up, it's going to drive up everybody's labor cost, and at some point, margins can only erode so much without having to do something with pricing.
Yep.
One of our hardest things has been for years to find good people, right? So isn't there an opportunity now for us to find good people for the companies that have over the number of employees that are forced to go get their employees backstage? They're going to be, they're leaving their companies. I mean, I got people calling.
in California over here?
Because I'm in Georgia.
I'm in Tennessee.
We're down to each other.
But I do. I mean, I'm seeing an opportunity right now to bring better quality people onto my staff. I mean, I've hired 2 people from Honeywell. I got 1 from Johnson Controls. I'm interviewing another one. So where people are being mandated.
But think of the impact figure out whichever industry you want to name, the impact there when you see the loss of workers is going to impact these big companies, the big manufacturers, Johnson Controls and Residio and Honeywell, and they're going to run into issues with their own shortage. And so I think it's a great opportunity for the smaller companies who may not have to abide by some rules or whatever these mandates are to capture new staff. But there's also going to naturally come changes when you got the manufacturers producing the product, developing these big, huge companies. They're going to be running into some issues, I think, too.
Well, I would add to that, your own internal training and onboarding is huge.
Yes.
So if you can bring, yes, I'm in a highly regulated
Right.
state, and Washington's not far behind, and Nevada just likes to copy everything that California is doing eventually. So it does come down that path, but it really comes down to how am I onboarding? And right now I'm making the investment into a training and development group that can take somebody and bring them from high school graduation and bring them through. It's hard to find somebody coming out of a tech school that can live in the Bay Area. Well, maybe I'll bring them on in Reno or bring them on in one of our other locations. So it feels like it's a little internal focused, but that's somewhat business. And that's my bigger focus is how to get those qualified individuals on our team, and then meet them where they're at and continue to help them grow to get them where we need them to be. So focusing on that training and development, what does the initial onboarding look like, is huge. And there's a lot of partnering with NTS. SIA has a lot of things out there, different organizations that will help us bring our people along. And then how do you incentivize your people to get where you want them to be? If it's a certificate that goes with them, that's one thing. If you've got a manufacturer training that serves a purpose for your customer, that's another thing too. So.
It really is a survival of the fittest time that we're in. So Darwin speaks loudly here, and everybody in the room's made it this far, and there's more to go. And it's a world of change, and I think you really have to embrace it and talk to your staff, talk to your customers, and continue ahead. But interesting times. I want to thank Deanne and Scott for joining. Thanks for joining us today.